Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow from the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and in the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this and nothing more.
Edgar Allan Poe was born as the second of 3 children in Boston on January 19, 1809. In 1811, when Edgar was only 2, his father abandoned the family, and shortly after his mother Elizabeth died. Each sibling being sent to a different home, Poe was taken in by a businessman, John Allan, and his wife Frances. Poe had no interest in the tobacco business, however, for he had dreams of becoming a writer, like his hero, Lord Byron, a British poet. Poe left Richmond to attend the University of Virginia in 1826, but started gambling in school because Allan had sent him with less than a third of the money he needed for college. Towards the end of his first year, Poe had to burn his own furniture just to keep warm. Poe returned home after that, humiliated and furious with Allan for his actions. After a big argument, Poe ended up storming out of the house, leaving to pursue a writing career. In 1827, at the age of 18, Poe published his first book, Tamerlane and Other Poems, then joined the United States Army. While he was away, his foster mother, Frances, died of tuberculosis. A few short years later, John Allan died as well, leaving Poe out of his well.
On September 22nd of 1835, now 27, Poe secretly married Virginia Clem, who was his 13-year-old first cousin. It was a very happy marriage. They sang together, they wrote poems about each other and to each other, and had a public wedding ceremony on May 18th in 1836. A year later, they moved to New York, and Poe managed to fool the city with a faux story of a balloon trip across the ocean. After that, they moved to Philadelphia. Poe worked at several magazine companies and had many successful jobs, but still struggled to make enough money to live. In 1839, Poe published the short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, which contains within it his poem, The Haunted Palace. 2 years later, he published the first detective story ever written, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. In 1842, Virginia contracted tuberculosis, the disease that had killed Poe's mother, brother, and foster mother. Later that same year, he published The Pit and the Pendulum, the popular horror short story. The next year, The Telltale Heart, now considered a classic of the Gothic fiction genre, came out before they moved back to New York in 1844. Poe's talent was finally recognized in 1845 when he published The Raven, getting himself known as a national celebrity. Also that year was published Eulalie, thought to have been written for his wife Virginia. Virginia's health continued to deteriorate, so in 1846 they moved to a cottage in the country, now known as Poe's Cottage, and Poe published the famous short story The Cask of Amontillado.
In the winter of 1847, in their small country cottage in New York, Virginia died at the age of 24. Poe was devastated and unable to write for months. After a grieving period, Poe courted a few women in his last years of life. He had plans to marry his first fiancée, Elmira Shelton, who was recently widowed herself. Edgar Allan Poe died on October 7th of 1849. Only 40 years old, the exact cause of his death remains a mystery. Some believe he was mugged and robbed. There are others with theories of alcoholism, brain lesions, tuberculosis, epilepsy, diabetes, and even rabies. The nurse helping with Virginia suspected an injury to the heart after seeing a deep scar on his shoulder. The biggest mystery is the fact that he was not wearing his own clothes when he was found and brought to Washington College Hospital.
Poe remains a famous writer and has influenced many. Roger Corman produced and directed a series of 8 films based on Poe's works. The House of Usher in 1960, The Pit and the Pendulum in 1961, The Mask of the Red Death in 1964, The Premature Burial in 1962, The Tales of Terror in 1962, The Raven in 1963, The Haunted Palace, also in 1963, and The Tomb of Ligeia in 1964. Poe's life and works are still studied today. His complete works are on many recommended reading lists for high schools and colleges, and he is even idolized by some. Also, along with Blackbeard, Jesus, and the Crazy Cat Lady, you can get your own Edgar Allan Poe action figure. Many artists will draw their own rendition of Poe, often using symbols from his works surrounding him. The Mystery Writers of America even have Edgar Allan Poe Awards. They honor the best in mystery fiction, nonfiction, television, film, and theater published or produced in the previous year. Poe is still considered America's first great literary critic and theoretician.
I dwelt alone in a world of moan, and my soul was a stagnant tide, till the fair and gentle Eulalie became my blushing bride, till the yellow-haired young Eulalie became my smiling bride. Ah, less bright the stars of the night than the eyes of the radiant girl, and never a flake that the vapor can make with the moon tints of purple and pearl can vie with the modest Eulalie's most unregarded curl, can compare with the bright-eyed Eulalie's most humble and careless curl.